Hey guys, Sensei here, and welcome to another Shadowlands beta video. Now, I had started doing these and I kind of took a break from the Covenant Soulbinds, but now I'm back and we're going to go over the Maldraxxus Soulbinds. So overall, Maldraxxus is definitely, to me, it seems more of a defensive utility-based Covenant. Now, a lot of the Covenant Soulbinds aren't going to be like game-changing currently. Some of them might be better than others, but overall, it doesn't seem like you're going to be missing out on too much if you pick a specific covenant over another. But with the fleshcraft and as you see some of the soul binds coming up, you'll notice that it's not quite like some of the other ones. It's also, I believe, the only covenant where their first soul bind is not the one that gives you three of the potency conduits. That's the second one. So let's just go ahead and go over them now. So the first one is using fleshcraft with nearby corpses will derive benefit from the corpse based on the creature type. Now, the thing about this one is this actually might be good. I don't actually know what those benefits are, um, so it could be pretty decent. But it's also from nearby corpses. So as you can see, as you'll see from Maldraxxus, and it makes sense because of the theme, a lot of it has to do with corpses or defeating enemies and things like that. And in an actual scenario of like raiding in dungeons, it will kind of depend on the fight. If you're just doing like a single target fight, um, like think of Shadhar, for instance, from Nyalotha. There's no ads in that fight, so this would be completely useless on a fight like that. And then you can just choose between the three different conduits. And then depending on which conduit you pick, you either get Bloop, where standing still will slowly build stacks of Wanderlust, so it'll increase your movement speed depending on how many stacks you have. Oh, no, it'll increase your movement speed once you get to 10 stacks. So if you stand still long enough, then you'll get your movement speed increased for 2 minutes. And then when you get below 50% health, Ooze will give you a shield for 10% of your maximum health for 20 seconds. And then your first attack or spell cast on an enemy increase your damage done by 10% for 5 seconds. That definitely seems like it can be pretty good, but it's only your first attack on an enemy, and it won't occur if they're already striking another target. So for 5 seconds after you hit an enemy, you'll do 10% more damage to them. But if it's already another enemy, also like an AoE situation, now you've lost that ability to do the extra damage, and it's only the first. It's only for the first 5 seconds. So it can still be decent, but it may not be worth losing the potency conduit slot depending on your class. You'll notice that a lot of these will kind of depend on the conduits, where your conduits is really going to be where you is what's going to be the decision. Is the conduit more important than the trait that you get? And then free finesse, and then kind of general ones, or just not combat ones. So this one basically lets you pick locks, um, and also when you're channeling fleshcraft, and that'll reduce the cooldown. So normally it's a 12-hour cooldown, but each second, I think it said, yeah, each second spent channeling fleshcraft will reduce it by 1 hour. So fleshcraft is 4 seconds. So each time you use fleshcraft, that's a 4-hour reduction to that. So it's even though it's 12-hour cooldown, it's not that big of a deal. And then defeating enemies will have a chance to improve your remaining durability. So again, it depends on really, do you want to open locks or get durability? But really, do you want endurance or finesse? Free potency, and then fleshcraft will give you immune to crowd control. So this definitely seems like the more utility-based one. Um, Nothing too big for combat, depending on what the corpse benefits you get, but just more utility-based. Now this one is interesting. This one I think is actually good for all three roles: DPS, healing, and tank. Um, Definitely for DPS because it's the one with the three potency conduits. But as for tank and healing, it will depend on your class's conduits. So the first one you get is Magnificent Skin, and it's just whenever you use your class ability, the Necrolord class ability that is, or spell. So for monks, that would be the Bone Dust Brew. Whenever you use it, you get a stack of Beneficent Skin, and it stacks up to 4 times. And whenever you use Fleshcraft, it'll consume your stacks and then increase your maximum health by 5% per stack. So that's why this is one that that's the first one that you get, and you don't choose, you automatically get it. And so that can be really good for, again, all specs, but really good for tank because you can get up to um, 20% extra health. And depending on your class, you might be able to get that fairly quickly. I mean, the Fleshcraft will always have this 2-minute cooldown, but for monks, this is a 1-minute cooldown, but I do have a conduit that can reduce that. So depending on your class's ability and how much you're able to get it, you can get to that 20% max health pretty quickly. And then again, this will pretty much just depend on whether you want potency or endurance. And again, it just depends on your class. As a monk tank, I would rather have the endurance conduit. But obviously as a DPS, I'd rather have the potency conduit. And as a healer, I'd probably want the potency conduit more. But it's just taking fall damage will increase your shield, or taking fall damage will give you a shield based on the health lost. And then this one is just gives you a new Hearthstone that has its cooldown reduced every time you get a killing blow. So then a free finesse one, and then another one where you have 3 different choices, which will largely depend on the conduit type that you want. If you want the potency conduit type, then you're going to get this Gristle Toes, which movement speed is increased by 2% for every nearby enemy, up to 10%. And the other one is a haste increase by 1% for 20 seconds after defeating an enemy, up to 5%. Can be pretty decent if you want haste, but again, it has to be after defeating an enemy, whereas the movement speed is just when there's nearby enemies. And then when you're reduced below 20% health, you can fear nearby enemies. This one can be pretty good, but it depends on if they get feared away from you, they can potentially pull groups, and that is something that you cannot control if you get below 20% health. So that could be more harm than anything else. And then of course give you the finesse one. Um, but as a DPS, though, this definitely seems like the best route because one, you get your potency conduit, and the movement speed is just going to be a constant increase, whereas the haste one is only when you defeat enemies. And then another free potency, and then the last one is interesting because it's basically every time you defeat an enemy, you'll get a stack of Runescribe Bone, and then that reduces your magic damage taken. So again, that mixed with the top one alone seems very tank oriented because it reduces damage. And again, that's helpful for any role, but especially helpful for tank. And it's reduced magic damage by 1% for 30 seconds, and it'll stack. And then at 5 stacks, your soulbind traits are also empowered for 30 seconds. So basically, after killing 5 enemies, you'll get an empowerment for 30 seconds, and so it'll make the magnificent skin to wherever you release the stacks, it'll also deal damage. So that can be turned into a DPS cooldown basically, and like you can basically save up your stacks up to the point where you get the empowerment, and then release the stacks to not only increase your health by 20%, but also do damage to all nearby enemies. So that's pretty good. And then the shield amount's doubled from the legs. Again, that's just from the fall damage, so it's not that big of a deal. Cooldown reduced again for the new Hearthstone. But then the movement speed is increased by 3% instead of 2%. So it can go up to 25% instead. So that's that's useful. Movement speed is useful, especially for melee DPS. So like imagine having a Death Knight here. This would actually be pretty good in addition to having that potency conduit. And the haste being double can be good too. So it'd be 10%. That might make it more appealing. Again, you still have to kill, and then the fear duration is increased. So yeah, this one's I think definitely the one that you would probably take as a DPS, but you could also take it for tank, especially if you know, because it gives you 2 endurance ones if you go that route, and there's some pretty tank specific things with health increase and damage reduced damage taken. And then the last one is actually it can also work for tank as well. It can also work for healer, but again, this one I think works for healers simply for the fact that you get potency conduits. That's really it. None of these really seem like healer oriented, like some of the other um, covenants, like for Kyrian, for instance, or Night Fae. They seem like they have like a DPS healing and or tank. They seem like they kind of fit. This one doesn't seem to have one that's specifically designed for healers, other than the conduits. And then this one though, if you're getting hit by melee, then you're going to do damage. The damage is really small, but still, if you like, and if you need the endurance conduit, like most tanks will probably want, that's still, the way to go. Because the other one is, it reduces the fleshcraft cooldown by 1 second. Now that can still be good, but considering you're getting a finesse conduit instead of endurance, then you're probably going to want the other one. And then the potency for free, and then you choose. Really kind of will depend on the conduit that you want. As a tank, you're probably going to want to go here, which after landing 10 crit strikes, you gain 20% crit strike, increased crit strike for 10 seconds. But it can only occur once per minute. And then you could also do damaging or healing a target below 35% will increase your movement speed. So that's the only one so far that will directly interact with healing. But it's movement speed, which is always going to be useful, but it, you know may not be as useful as other things. But it does give a potency conduit. So that's the second time they've had a movement speed go into a potency conduit, which is pretty beneficial. And then defeating enemy restores 1% of your max health. I feel like this can definitely be pretty good, especially in like Mythic Plus or any fight where you're gonna have a lot of enemies, because you're stacking, so you basically get up to 5% of your max health every 3 seconds, or after 3 seconds. But then it gives you the finesse conduit, so you'd have to weigh your conduit choices. Is this better than their potential potency or endurance conduit? And it may not be. A free endurance conduit, and then mounted movement speed will be increased by 5% and increased even more if you're attacked. Just mining materials. And the last one is interesting because it's upon death, your armor continues to fight, allowing you to fight for an additional 10 seconds. But during this time, your damage and healing is reduced by 50%, and you can't receive healing. So it's an interesting concept, but compared to like other ones, other like, capstone traits, it doesn't seem that great. Like it's better than, nothing. Like if you're dead, at least you can fight for 10 seconds, but you're at 50% effectiveness and you can't be healed. So it's like you're not going to come back to life. It's just that you can continue to fight for 10 seconds. Now, that could potentially, if it counts as somebody being alive, that could potentially save games, honestly. Like, but it's such a niche scenario. Like imagine your whole group, for instance, has that. So instead of a full party wipe, your entire team is alive for 10 seconds in animated armor. And for 10 seconds, that could be the difference between wiping if you're a few percent down. So that could save games. It really could. And that'd be interesting to see, but I still feel like overall it's not, if the rest of the tree is good, then yeah, it's fine. I still feel like it's not that worth it. It's only very small scenarios where that's going to actually be, useful, considering that it's such a reduction to your healing and damage. But I mean, if you're able to actually do everything as a tank, it is it's weird because it's like you can't receive healing. So does that mean you're going to die again? I don't know. It's something that have to be kind of tested out, but. Yeah, those are all the traits. Those are all the soul binds, and again, seems more defensive and uh, utility based, but there are still some decent DPS ones. If you like the video, please give a like and subscribe for future videos. And as always, thanks for watching.